Well, welcome back to Destination Aviation. I'm your host, Jeff Miller. As usual, probably know who I am by now, unless it's your first time tuning in. And if it is, thanks for tuning in. We have a great conversation here today with Grant Bishop. He is the president and CEO of Silent Falcon, which does a lot of work with drone technology, making places safer, and also helping with the economics of airports. We're going to get right into that conversation with Grant, and then we will follow up with some show notes at the end. Well, Grant, welcome to Destination Aviation.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Great to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. Thank you to Nicole, or I also say Dr. Byer. It depends on how official I'm talking to her, for putting us together. I always love great conversations, so I'm looking forward to this one after looking at your resume. But speaking of which, maybe for the listeners, and I mentioned this to Nicole, it's hard to get a complete pulse on every episode, but I often say half and half, 70-30, but there's a good amount that are just aviation enthusiasts, want to listen to people in aviation, and they love to hear a little bit of background before we get going. So maybe you could just talk about who you are and why we're here talking today.
Sure. Well, I tell you what, Nicole made me feel like I was getting ready to go to the prom or something coming on your show. So you had me prep, told me what to wear, anyhow. I get the whole thing. So it's Dr. Byer when we come to the show, right?
Did she say, he'll probably be wearing an airport polo? He's a very formal guy.
Yeah, she goes through the whole laundry list of how you got to look online. So anyway,
You do look very good. I'm going to
Well,
say
thanks.
you look very put together.
This is my fifth change after like 5 calls from her this morning.
Nice.
And I might slightly exaggerate there. Anyway, yeah. So aviation wise, I actually, I'm an old dude. So in college, I started flying when I was 16, but in college, I got my sort of real taste of sort of the aerospace industry working on Reagan's Star Wars initiative. And so I was a designer in college while I was going to school, and we were designing optics to look at satellites from the ground and then figure out ways to fire lasers at them to neutralize them. Then joined the Air Force, was there for 20 years. I was a Wild Weasel, so shooting SAM sites. And then after I got out of the service, back to that company I was doing the Star Wars stuff with. It was the Reagan initiative, and started taking essentially one of type systems and turning them into systems that could be commercialized. So Concorde had just crashed. I created a system for detecting FOD using millimeter wave radar. And that kind of stuck with me from about 2005 until about 2019, where I was just traveling the world, helping airports put in systems that would make the runway safe. And now got hired away by a company called Silent Falcon. They were building drones and wanted to compete with Boeing. I said, kind of too small to do that, but hey, the data coming off the drone, there's this thing called AI. I said, we can solve a lot of problems in aviation. So from 2019 to now, pivoted the company. We got our approvals from the FAA, but we essentially digitize airfields and use AI to analyze them and make them cheaper, better, faster, safer.
There's a lot on there to unpackage, but the first thing I want to ask is, so, you hear the running joke from the Reagan administration that, the Star Wars was basically that it was fantasy. And it's interesting, what you just talked about with Concorde crashing and from when Reagan left office. And so with that process, and now with the Golden Dome, and we see, what, Israel seems to be working very well. How do you, is that a false narrative? Because I didn't know they were working on that as long as into the 2000s. So that's very interesting to me. And then two, do you think that the lessons learned is what they're using now for the Golden Dome? Or do you see it, since you were involved, and all I ever really hear is very the outside perspective, and it's a tagline along with other taglines that people like to talk about, especially now that the Golden Dome has been resurfaced.
So, I think the bottom line is physics doesn't really change, right? It's the
Yeah.
technologies that we use. And so the changes that I've seen from when I was, first involved to now are pretty amazing. And you see it's sort of gone from almost what I would say is high tech to a commodity, right? Where what you hear on TV is not, oh, hey, it's working or defending. Hey, it's costing this much money to take out this much money coming at it, right? So, this will continue to evolve, and with AI, everything has got that OODA loop, the observe, orient, decide, act, and it's just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so Uh, I I think that, the laser capabilities have always been limited. It's the regulatory side that really holds back on the technology, and we're seeing that in everything right now. But, you know, you can kinda do just about anything with the technology.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting and it's spooky at the same time. I just was at a conference out in LA, and it was the first time I used a Waymo. And I was tickled pink. I was driving up to West Hollywood, and I was like, "Ah," and it was great, and I was texting her, I was like, "That's it. I'm never getting a car with a human being if I could do it again." Blah, blah. I did all of that for the first hour, and then on the way back, it's coming down, and I pulls up to the hotel, right? It's nighttime in LA, downtown, so there's a big lighted awning and nobody there, and it's where you pick up. It's a pickup drop off curb. He goes, "We're at your destination." Slides right past it, down, 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 down. Uh, Pulls right up in front of I guess, housingly challenged encampment, and I opened my door, and I'm like, "This is where you're gonna drop me off in the middle of the street and at night in front of 'em? Okay." So it did me dirty a few times in LA, I'm gonna say. It dropped me off at the Coliseum on the opposite side. Now, I probably could have got through and fixed all that, I will say that, but I did. You can feel that it's all there, all the technology's there, and I was so impressed. It even kinda drove a little bit like me when it came up to a yellow light. Instead of stopping, it gunned it. It went through the yellow light, and I'm like, "Hey, this is not bad." But I was impressed. The one thing that I was thinking while I was sitting in it, I guess it's lidar, all the stuff spinning around. I'm like, I feel like I'm sure they've looked into it, but there, I would be lying if I didn't say there was a part of my brain that I was like, "Am I just sitting in a microwave right now?" I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it's not. But
Yeah, those I think the more they start to fuse the data,
yeah.
with the optics and lidar and all those things, each one's got advantages. And I have a Tesla, so I like using the auto drive. My wife hates it, but
Really?
I
Okay.
think it's really cool. But it does, you see the different things it encounters. You can kind of watch it think through what it's going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool. I haven't done the Waymo one yet, but I'm looking forward to my first ride in one.
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned the regulatory, and you can kinda see it on full display there, and that is right now some of the limiting factors, like going back to LAX. You can't go to the curb, and I'm assuming they just don't let them go to the curb. There may be something else I'm missing, but considering what I saw in the city, I don't see any reason why I couldn't go to the curb, but so you have to go to transfer station, you're like, I'm not gonna do that." But I have gotten into some cars, and most drivers are great, and you have a nice conversation, but I've gotten into some that are some weird conversations right out of the door, and you're like, "How long is this drive?" And it was nice that that wasn't even on the table. It's just me in here, and I felt like I was in Jurassic Park or something. I don't know what was going on, but with your military history now, I know you went quickly over it, but while I was reading what Nicole had sent over, I mean, one, thank you for your service. Two, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask, since I just had some A-10 pilots on, what's your favorite military aircraft? Is it the F-16?
What do I wanna win? So if I wanna win over a crowd, I always say A10, but
Okay.
actually, it's kinda funny, and thank you for your support of the military and all those people out there that do that in business. I was thinking about the other day, because we all have our rivalries, inter-service and inter-Air Force, and I won't go into the depths of them because it's probably too embarrassing for folks, but here's the thing about the A10. It is, and I think, did they talk about this last week? Do they still use a calendar for their airspeed indicator?
No, they didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, they go pretty slow. But but
I'm
I will
pretty
say,
slow too, because it took me a minute to be like, wait a minute, what did he say? Maybe I should be at A-10. Oh, I have to get it.
so it's, the thing that when you see an A10 show up, what you have to realize is that we are winning, right? Because
Yeah.
the fact that it flies so slow, and you've seen them shot up, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Grandmas are out there taking a shot at them, right? So, the fact that we send them out there, and the pilots are fearless, they get out there and they don't worry about it, they got a great machine, they always wanna talk about the bullet and the gun,
Yeah.
but and it's why, in the battle skirmish, it's like, "Okay, why don't you guys go over there and you go deal with the army guys," 'cause, and they're sort of the, I would what do they call it? The redheaded stepchild of the Air Force because they deal more with the Army, they affiliate more with them, but it is an incredible aircraft, and there's a lot of politics about, why they discontinued it, and it goes back and forth all the time, and I gotta just say that, it has this niche that I don't think is ever gonna go away. We ought to figure out if it's not the A-10, what's the A-10 do, or whatever the case may be. They did some stuff after, um, let's see, after Iraq, called Fast FAC, where they started to shift some of the roles over to the F-16, and I remember we were learning how to fire rockets with the F-16, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, we can do it, but at the same time, by the time what scares people on the ground is when the airplane never leaves their sight, essentially, and it's coming back around to get them, like you see in the
Yeah.
movies. And that's the great thing about the A-10s. It's close air support, and it makes the good guys on the ground feel happy they're there, and it does an incredible job. And it's just when I see it show up in combat, like we see right now, I'm like, okay, well, we are crushing them.
Yeah.
So it's awesome to see it used in new roles, and who knows, maybe that will change what happens with it in its future.
No, I love that. I love that the series of events is there will be the A10 episode and then your episode right after it. And I will say to both sides, in that conversation there was how they talked about each one of you basically the system needs to be operating and echoing what you're saying when the A10 comes in, the F-16's done its job, or I may be saying the aircraft off a little bit, but basically a system of planes, a system of not just planes, but everything that comes together to say, okay, we're progressing in whatever skirmish, excursion, or operation,
Right.
because a synonym there of where we are. But with your background, you also too, you were a part of bringing, is it Poland into NATO or their military up to NATO standards? Is that how I'm
Yes.
reading that correctly?
Yeah, and before we leave the A-10 discussion,
Yes, please.
the F-16 is the greatest aircraft ever, just like just like you had said before we started recording. But
Exactly. That's what I said. Are you going to hit me with any sophisticated jokes that I'm not going to be able to understand quickly or at the same time?
so I was working within NATO at Ramstein Air Base. It was called TAC Eval. So my job was to go around and evaluate all the various NATO countries when they were off vacation, to see how they would do in combat. At this time, Poland, Czech Republic, was it Bulgaria, came into NATO. And so as soon as they were sort of out of the clutches of the bad guys, they sent us out there to teach them how to fly Western tactics, just so that we could say, okay, let's go. Here's how we're going to fly a box, tactical formation, etc. But I got to tell you, it was amazing. Um, I suddenly lost my fear of any Soviet made aircraft. They're so bad. And, each got into I was flying in the Su-22 fitter a lot, and you would climb into the aircraft, and a lot of the stuff was pneumatically powered. So
Wow.
it was like being Captain Nemo's submarine. You hear all this air whooshing around. And then there's some for the aviators in the crowd, the ADI, the way a typical ADI moves is the round ball moves. It's the opposite in the Soviet-built aircraft, at least on these. The aircraft moves around. So you could be upside down and you're looking at a horizon with an airplane inverted. Totally very difficult to comprehend
Do you
and
think there's a
understand.
reason for that? Or
Uh,
do
It's
they?
it's communist bill.
Okay, so it's just
There's no incentive to be better, right?
okay. All right.
Let's just be even. I
I also
apologize to all the communists out there, by the way. No, but when you look at that, I mean, that's the thing about aviation. And like when I look at, when I was reading your book for the
no, yes, 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 yes.
uh, data, right? Whichever aircraft company you look at in America, they look at data and they go, how can we make this better? And they talk to everybody. They have teams come around and talk to everybody. And they don't just talk to the pilots, right? Because it's the whole ecosystem. They want to know, hey, how's the communications with everybody? How's the logistics with everybody? Back to the Poland deal is I was flying with those guys every other week, and I had to learn how poorly they'd been taught. So, like, the pilots didn't start the aircraft. The ground control officer would start the aircraft. And all of this was because they were afraid the pilots would defect. So
Wow.
the pilots didn't know how to start the airplanes.
Uh,
The pilots didn't do the planning. They had a navigation officer who would come and load the navigation points into the aircraft, and they would get handed a map. Now, the best part of all, there was no fuel information inside. You never knew how much fuel it had. All you knew
it's like flying
was
a
that
172.
the all all you knew was that the mission you were flying had enough fuel because the people on the ground had planned it and done it.
It's that bad.
It was
Wow.
crazy.
What year would this have been?
It was pardon me?
Oh, I'm sorry. What year would this when you were in Poland, what year was that?
This was, uh, 99, 2000, roughly.
99.
Yeah, in fact,
And
I
it
think it was
was,
I got a picture of it up there.
oh, wow. So they had been that's about close to a decade since they had, fallen right from
Yeah, and then we started to roll in, started to bring in Western aircraft, and I think they ultimately chose the F-16. Smart
yeah.
decision.
Do you feel nowadays with what's happened in Russia that is it Su-57? Is that their newest aircraft, something like that? I forget now,
Latest one
but
they've copied from us?
yeah, right. But do you feel that that mentality is still somewhat in existence? Do you think that there's still fear that their pilots wanna defect, that type of stuff, or has it evolved and shifted and changed? I'm just curious your opinion on that.
I don't know if it's, uh I don't know about the defection. There's a number of defections that have occurred, and there's some books out on it. It's kind of interesting. I don't think it's
Yeah,
that strict anymore. There seems to be, but, I'm sure that there's some changes there. I mean, it is a way to get out of the country quickly, right?
yeah,
Whether you're an oligarch or anything, you can heck, you could jump into your very expensive business jet, and suddenly you're carrying $50 million with you, essentially, right? In
yeah,
the jet itself.
yeah.
So, it's always gonna be a mode of moving wealth and value quickly, whether it's for freedom or money or just escaping, whatever the case may be.
We had, so I worked at a fixed base operator in Daytona Beach, Florida once in my life, and, I remember it's so long ago now, but we had a Russian family, oligarch type family. I didn't know what that word was back then. Barely know now. I just hear Bernie Sanders say it enough. They showed up, some wealthy. Okay, we did something with Putin or whatever. But I remember distinctively that so the aircraft was made up in such a way. It was for one family. There was a 737. It had its own hot tub in it and like a splash proof pad that went over it. And then they bought, was it at the time, 35, I think, in fuel or something like that. And when it came time to pay, they had a guy with a briefcase with handcuff around his wrist. And they opened up their briefcase and they started counting out
Wow.
$35,000. I was like, "Oh, okay. That's a new one for me," you know? And at that point in my life, I grew up pretty poor coming from Michigan and seeing this and being I don't know, it's like, I don't understand it. You can't even get me to oligarchy at that point. I just am like, why does this guy have all this money? But yeah, so yeah, it's interesting. And then and I wrote this down too because I thought this was very interesting because I think I remember hearing about this, but the 21 days to Baghdad and your not only your what you've did on your service, and again, thank you for that, but you were mentioned, is it Time magazine or
Yeah.
you tell me I'm wrong?
There's a copy sitting over there, yeah,
Okay.
they did, they were trying to embed reporters and things like that with the various groups, and so we had, a couple folks embedded with us, so every morning I would get done flying, and I had the night shift, so I'd get in at about 4 or 5 a.m., have a quick cleanup, and then the BBC would interview me, and
Oh,
I
wow.
would talk to them, but then Time Magazine did an article, they wanted to kinda look at the entire squadron, basically, which was, for every pilot that's out there on the point, there's 10 people that are keeping the airplane operating. And then you think about, well, how about the infrastructure of the airfield, right? And you start to see, and people don't understand, people walk down a jetway and they just think la di da di da, they don't understand all the timing and the criticalness, and especially when there's snow ops, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the people that have gotta leave their families and sleep at the airport so they
Yeah.
can make sure that somebody gets to Florida on time, you know? So it's a good book. It talked more about, this was Operation Iraqi Freedom. So it's 2000. What is that? 2003. But the point of what they tried to do was to show all the the infrastructure and the ecosystem that goes and is involved in everything we do from the time, you put fuel in it, whether there's a guy standing there with a case full of cash or whatever, but to the time, you hit the pickle button because you can't do it. There's about 100 people pushing on that button that are never in the cockpit with you. But if they didn't do their job, you wouldn't be there.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny, and I mentioned just coming back from LA, and I am an airplane nerd. It's my business. I've been in this industry since I was 16, and where I had positioned myself, then I did it on purpose, but I was visually aligned with the pilots when they were in their 737 MAX 9, and they had just pulled up, and I was watching everybody go around, the team, and start hooking stuff up, pull the tug over, pull over the air supply off the jet bridge, and, pilots are in there shutting down, and I'm just watching them somewhat like a psychopath, just watching them through the window. Eventually, they looked over and they're like, I'm sure it's the sun, the nice LA sun coming through their windscreen, but it's amazing the system that's there. And it's funny because I went to Japan. And if you've ever flown in and out of Japan, it is so organized and just so like we landed in a 777, and I wanna say everybody was off that plane in 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. It was insane. It was just
Yeah.
out the door, and everybody was, on the ramp in a full jumpsuit, hard hat. It was like a well-oiled machine. When we got back to the States, still a machine, a little less oil in it, but we pulled up to O'Hare, and I watched the guy because I was on a transfer flight back to Pittsburgh, and he was grabbing each bag and doing the chuck from the cart to the bag belt, and about 1 out of 5 hit the ramp. The rest were going up, and he was also chewing on sunflower seeds and spitting them in the bags. And we're watching him, and I'm watching this guy, and he's not even paying attention that 1/5 of the bags are piling up on the ramp next to him. So he finally gets, because I'm in the plane, right? And I'm watching from the back. I'm watching. Finally, he walks away, gets back in the cart, looks over, sees the bag, drives away. Pilot gets out. He's like, we're going to be delayed probably about maybe 10 minutes. And I'm like, gee, I wonder what the delay is. No, and it is, it's a fun job. I worked line service, ramp service, fueling. I think a lot of people do that when they start off their careers in aviation. And I always said it was the best of the bad jobs because, at this age, my back's not going to let me get into the hold of a 777, 737 or something. It was, and you got to meet so many fun people like you, people that, were in the military that now have transitioned into civilian life or military too. Where I was at in Daytona, we had the military contracts. I got to see some of I will agree. I do. The F-16s are beautiful machines. Besides getting to, touch it, not from the outside, unlike you, but and stare at it and glance at it. But yeah, no, it is. It's amazing to me, when you travel, because I fall into that same pattern where I'll be in the back of the plane and I'll be like, Wi-Fi's not working. And I'll forget that I'm at 34,000 feet hurling across the country and, going from LA back to Chicago in an afternoon and I think I'm like, I did that and I try to have more appreciation for it than my brain gives me in the moment. Cause I'm like, for settlers, this was their life going west, right? Like, all right, get in the cart. We're not coming back ever. But do you feel, and I'm not going to try to put you on the spot, so you just tell me if you don't want to and we'll move on, but you have a
I
lot
don't
of
want to.
experience with with NATO. How do you feel are, kind of like their role in the earth, all politics everywhere? I mean, there's a lot of conversations about, countries paying their fair share, and I know that's bumped up over the years, but you've worked closely with the NATO partners. Do you like where at least can you see the value of where it could be, where it's moving? Do you have your own opinions on it? Just curious, since you were so involved.
Yeah. I apologize for all the hostile NATO lovers that will be calling you after these comments. So, the running joke and again, this is back in 2000. So, but when I showed up, the office was filled with, every different country in NATO. And my job was to go around and evaluate the different bases, American, the Brits, Germans, all of them. I loved my time there, but the acronym for NATO that we used was not at the office because each country, I think some of them gave them like 60 days of vacation every year. So
Wow.
imagine trying to just coordinate to get everybody together for one day.
Yeah.
So, and you gotta remember a lot of the size of those countries is the size of some of our states, right? And so
Yeah.
their challenge is they don't have the ability to really ramp up and have mass amounts of industry, and that's their challenge, but I like the way things are going right now and that we're demanding that you guys gotta step up and pay your fair share. I don't like when a country that we have poured lots of resources into doesn't allow us to use the base, right? That wasn't
Yeah.
part of the deal. It wasn't
Yeah.
like, oh, it's closed today because we don't like what you're doing. So I think that we need to have a real sit down with them because we pump. Okay, this is me, but I would rather have all those people back here in a more mobile type ability and capability where we can roll them out anywhere in the world. It's kind of like the Navy does, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, when we struck around the world with B-2s out of the middle of our country, that's the power that this military has. There's no one close, really
Yeah.
isn't. No one close. And you can talk about other countries and attrition rates is what they start to look at, but they don't realize the power of and the capabilities of the companies that build all of this infrastructure and the support that goes around it. You think of like you were talking about, you're walking down a jetway, all the people that are involved in aviation and have volunteered to be there and love it, don't get us mad because we are going to come after you. And and I think that that's what we're seeing. And NATO, I think they need to have a real top to bottom review of, what the purpose of it was set for. And does that purpose expand or contract? And then let's reset and go from there.
Yeah, yeah, no, I really appreciate that. As a citizen and only being able to see, typically, and you go, I try to get a eclectic news uh bowl together for either my weekend of okay, here's a story. I'm gonna listen to the story here. I'm gonna go to someone who's on the other end of the spectrum and listen to the story there. Maybe I can find where it is. And but I love one because you were there, and you got to experience all of it. So your opinion should matter more than most, at least in my opinion. I would
Well,
say. I mean, you've experienced it.
I appreciate it. And I was fortunate enough that I went to a school in the UK where we got to meet with everybody and do exercises together for a year. It was really great. And then seeing everything in action. You got to remember, Europe, they still use conscripts, right? It's a very different mindset. Our military is volunteer. We want to be there. And, I just, a lot of people don't realize it. Clearly you do, but America is the best country in the world. There's no one
Yeah,
close. No one
yeah,
close. And
yeah,
when you go to these places and they don't appreciate the fact that, "Okay, you guys got a problem? Alright, we'll come over and help you out," And then they get mad at us, it's like,
Oh, yeah. No, it's I often think about it, you know, growing up in the US, just the mathematics behind how fortunate you are to be born here, and not saying we don't have problems, but I think unlike most of the world, we are probably one of the few countries where you can express whatever that viewpoint is, that you think there's a problem, or two, that you're willing to work on it. Or look at other countries. I mean, no country is squeaky clean on history, but we're probably the only country that at least admits to it, and says, hey, look, progress wise over years where we were and where we are now. I couldn't be more prouder to be from the USA. And yeah, and I think that, the people that I see that love this country the most are the people that immigrate here because they did come from something where you can't, it's funny. So when I was in Texas, and Mexico, I'm not saying that, you look at Mexico, we travel there, it's nearby, and, you wouldn't maybe put it on a list necessarily of like, oh my God, like, I lose all my freedoms going to Mexico, but I, would work a lot with the airlines down there in my role. And, you would talk with airline executives and stuff, and they were like, "Yeah, it's just, I want to move to the States. The corruption here is out of control." I'm like, "Well, we have corruption in the States." I remember there was this one airline executive, and he would say this joke, and he's like, "Oh, you ever hear about, the politician from Mexico and the politician from the U.S. And the politician from Mexico goes and visits the politician in the States, and he goes, 'You see that? Look at my big house, look at my yard, look at my pool.' And a politician from Mexico's like, 'How do you afford all this?' He's like, 'You see that road down there?' He's like, 'Yeah.' He's like, 10%." He's like, "Oh." And he's like, and then a few months later, the American politician comes down to Mexico. He goes to his house and he goes, "Oh my God, you have an airplane. Your house is 3 times as big as mine. Uh, you have all these cars. How do you afford all this?" He's like, "You see that road down there?" And the American politician's like, "No." He's like, "That's right, 100%." I'm like, okay. But, it is, it's for everything that we have. I mean, the freedoms that you have here to be able to freely move, to freely express. Yeah, I look at across the spectrum of the world, and people say to me, because I listen, I'm at a point in my life where no matter where you're at in your political spectrum, I'll be friends with you. I think there needs to be more of that in the world. When I have some friends that are like, "I'm out of here," and I'm like, "I'm never going anywhere." So have fun and enjoy. I'm just as happy right here in good old US of A.
Yeah. Yeah, we ought to be able to have some debates without getting all worked up about it, but
Yeah, yeah, and it's yeah, I'm hoping maybe we're moving more towards that. I don't know, but we'll see. But it starts with, like this. You look at our country and you look at some places and it's just so stacked against you that like Russia, we talk about oligarchies and stuff. I mean, I will say in the United States, I grew up extremely poor. And, I was able to move myself into middle class and have what I consider a very nice life built out of it. And you can't really say that for most of the world. You can't really say anything in most of the world. But so you find yourself in the military. It's early 2000s. When did you officially retire from the military? Was it around there?
2005. Yeah, I joined in '85, retired in 2005.
2005. And so at that point, you must have had thousands of hours of flight experience, right? I would assume.
Yeah, it's about from the military side, about 3,000 hours.
Is there at that, and I know, obviously, because I lived through that too. You have beautiful hair. I'm just going to say that up front. I'm hair envious. I'm going to point it out.
Thank thank Nicole, because Nicole made me quaff and do everything, you know.
See, it's perfect. I can just roll right out of bed and say, "Is there a podcast this morning?" But, I remember that time and then obviously 2008, and it wasn't, secular in the commercial side of aviation. But with all that experience and time, just curious, you had no interest in wanting to go, I don't want to say a traditional route, but a route that many people in the military take of going and then flying for the airlines or maybe for a 135 operator or something, but that's not something you wanted to do?
Yeah, the I know I've always been, even when I was in the military, I was always trying to come up with innovation. My friends would always tease me, I'm not really a .mil guy, I'm more of a .com guy, even in the so, because like I got to tell you, for the viewers, I got your book here, and I tried to create something like this for the Air Force in the squadrons, where it's like we weren't thinking business like, and
Yeah,
so my desire was after I'd finished the Air Force, I didn't want to do the airlines because I thought it's like going from Formula One driving to Greyhound bus driving, right? I just didn't want
yeah,
to do that.
yeah.
But, and you're gone from home half the year. Just, I know it works great for some people. It just wasn't for me. I like business and innovation. And so that's the route I went in. But I wanted to own and operate an airport. I thought that that would be really, really cool. So I'm very envious of what you do
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
because it's like a miniature city, really.
It is. It is. It is. I often, and our mutual friend, Nicole, was kind enough to invite me, probably not anymore now that she knows who I am and what I'm about, but was kind enough to invite me to talk to students at Embry-Riddle. And actually I got to just meet some of them out in LA. And it's funny because I wanted to fly when I started in the industry, and it was just atrocious salary wise. As you get older, you start to realize things that you were just saying was resonating with me that, not being on the road all the time. And I'm really happy with how my life went. And I try to express that to students because it's hard, because I'll go to a lot of career fields and fairs and try to, explain what I do. And I I have to really work to get people excited about it, at that age, because when a mechanic comes in, they can open up the engine. When a pilot comes in, they can take them onto the flight deck. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, "Did you ever hear about leases and budgets, kids?" Yes. Yeah, trust me, when you get older, you're gonna love it. I tell them, I'm like, I fly, so I fly out of the airport I'm out of. The only airport I didn't fly out of that I worked at was Laredo, and it was in the ADIZ, it was right on the border. It was 120 degrees, and I'm like, I don't know, like, am I just gonna kill myself in a 172 without AC, dripping sweat, and not even an airplane accident, just the heat exhaustion down at the end of the runway. Then I thought too, people are gonna, because the reality is, if you look like me and you're putzing around down there, there's a good chance you're probably doing something that's not legal. And I'd have to continuously explain, no, 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 I'm the airport manager. I swear, my ID's in my back pocket. So then I'm like, well, where am I going to go? Because typically when I fly, unlike you, I don't really have a mission, right? I'm just out buzzing around. So I'm like, what am I going to do where I'm not going to get involved with other national security interests? So it's the only airport I didn't fly at. But when I try to tell students like what I do today, I'm like, it's great because I get to go and I get to be a part of everything: the air traffic control organization, customs and border patrol, fixed base operators, so private industry, mechanics. If you're at a commercial airport, it can be good and bad. I don't necessarily miss, negotiating with the airlines because it's so weighted in their favors in the United States. At the end of the day, I can say, you know what, I'm going to go for a flight. I'm going to go up, and I've worked with a lot of people that love it, and they love that they became a pilot and they just want to keep moving. That I love that, and I love that for them. But I've also have a lot of friends that it's become a job. To your point about driving a bus, it's you go and you talk to them, and it's no longer about, hey, this is what I saw, this whatever, and I saw this airplane, right? Because a lot of times it's what you used to fly, right? You land somewhere and you're like, there's an F-16 on the ramp. And now it's like, you know what the union said? No, what did they say? What did they say? We're just cowtailing. No, 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 no. Okay. And I get it, and all that. That's where we all probably get at some point in life. But I love that I can still have some passion behind it, and I love where I work now because I work for a board of directors, but they give me a lot of latitude to operate the airport. And most airports in the United States, well, it's about 50-50, I'd say, are either authority structure or city county. And city county, right? You really become kind of an entity within that, and so for our case, I do have a lot of authority to really, when you go to a commercial airport these days and after 9/11, probably rightfully so, they do kind of resemble prisons, right? In some fashion or form. The thing I love about our airport is if you flew in tomorrow, there may be a kid on the other side of the fence line, and there's a fence line there, but it's a baby fence. It's enough to be like keep the deer hopefully and stuff away from you, but still give kids and stuff the ability to talk to a pilot getting out of a plane. And so I love those aspects of the job. And so when you were transitioning from the military, what was the first company you got picked up from? You mentioned it. I think it was part of Reagan Star Wars. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the company when I was in college was called Western Research, and then it evolved and became Trex, which was basically an R&D company, and it would
Yeah.
build all kinds of, I mean, these guys are brainiacs, and they would come up with stuff, and, they're the kinds of people that would do math in public and get it right, and you're just like, "Wow,
Yeah.
that's good,"
Yeah. Yeah.
and, did some incredible, incredible stuff, and in fact, I've hired some people from there in the company I work for now so that, because I could see they wanted to really turn it into a great business, and we all eventually left because, some businesses don't spawn the way you think they are, and so I went into more of an aviation orientation just because I was working with the FAA and getting the FOD detection equipment. And that's where I really learned about the regulation and all the lead time and everything. It's a pretty heavy lift. And I mean, that's the thing that I admire about you. And I mean, think of all the regulations you have to know like that, right? Because you're making decisions and talking to different customers. So that was my learning curve, but I enjoyed it and got to where we're now doing AI today and helping. Our ultimate goal is to help people like you, right? We digitize everything and go, look, I know that I always the method that I always found happens at most airports is TLAR. That looks about right, you know? And so you can take this data and we've been saving airports literally millions of dollars. You know, I think we've got like a 300 to 1 return on investment with what we provide. The transition for me going back to I wanted to go back to San Diego. That's where my family was from, and then this company actually relocated to Washington D.C. And I saw it as a great opportunity because I was dealing mainly with the FAA headquarters. And it's weird when you're on California and you say, "Hey, I want to come talk to you about this new change," and they're like, "Where are you from?" Don't worry about it. But when I moved here, I found out the Starbucks were there all hanging out, and I could go talk and just hang out with them and see them in the mornings and really, was able to kind of understand the inner workings
Yeah.
and built a great relationship up with a lot of them. And and that's how, in in the last few years, we've gone from being able now to instead of walking around and guessing what the pavement was like, is we can
Yeah.
tell you exactly down to the millimeter, and it saves so much money and improves safety.
So California's home for you.
Yeah. And you were mentioning immigrant. I'm an immigrant, actually.
Okay.
My parents were Brits, went to Australia. I was born there, and then they came to America.
Okay, must have been pretty young. I don't catch any
Yeah,
Australian.
yeah, I was a few years old, and the only reason we ended up staying here is because my mom was late in getting to the boat that would take us back, so I ended up just my mom was perpetually late, so thank you, mom.
So your Silent Falcon is based in Wisconsin.
No,
Okay.
we are based in Virginia, in Tyson's Corner,
Virginia. And so that's where you're residing today?
Yep.
Virginia. Okay. And so is that, I guess, two things. So just because I want to get on the side of the Falcon stuff, but families from California, you were living in Virginia. Is Virginia going to be home for you, you think? Is this where you want to retire eventually someday?
I'll go where business is,
Okay. Virginia's probably a good spot for business, let's say.
It is everybody's here, you got all the lobbyists are like
Right.
10 miles from here, I mean, you need an answer, you can find it pretty quick.
Stone's throw away. And so Silent Falcon, I was going to ask Nicole this someday, but I never got around to it. Is there any meaning to that name for you?
The official company name is, Buy UAS. George Buy was who started the company. But they built this long range. This is 2010. They built a long range electric solar UAS fixed wing that would go for hundreds of miles, a long endurance. And it was called Silent Falcon, was the name of the airplane.
Oh, okay.
And everybody forgot the name of the company and just would call it Silent Falcon. So we just started doing business as Silent Falcon.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Yeah, it's interesting because like where I'm at now, our name used to be Pewaukee, which I like Pewaukee. I had no problem with Pewaukee.
And it was started, I saw in here, in 1926, your 100-year anniversary this year.
You coming down? Nicole's coming 27th. We got a tri-motor, got some L-39s, got a B-25 coming in, couple DC-3s. Trying to sweet talk American and United to come since they're both 100 and based out of Chicago, but so far no avail there. Well, wait, you don't have any commercial traffic, so we have nothing to do with you. But no, so it's funny. I was just at the American Association of Airport Executives conference, and that was in LA. And there are a lot of airport managers that do listen to the show. Some like me, some don't. But the ones that don't still listen because they're like, I'm going to hear him fail. But no, I kid. All of my colleagues are very nice, but they do tune in. And so Nicole and I were talking a little bit. So we're hosting the General Aviation Conference over the summer, and she's, I think, I have her talking to some people there. I know she's coming to our state conference to get your product in front of some of the people on my side of the fence. But
Sure.
we, right now, like at our airport, and we're actually doing it think next week the state is so we're a block grant state, and I've explained this to some of the listeners in the past, but briefly, I'll just say as a block grant state, really at the core of it, the FAA hands the money off to the state, and the state decides where the funds are going to the airports. Anyway, so each one's designed a little bit differently, but in the state of Illinois' case, they do pavement condition assessing, and they're starting that next week through all the airports in Illinois. It's one of them, but it's traditional to the points you made earlier, Grant, going out, looking, assessing your product, though, like you said, with AI, brings in, I think probably too, and you could explain this to me and hopefully the listeners, but it speeds up, I would assume, speeds up the process, but also greatly improves the reporting that you're getting. And I'll stop there to let you explain it. But I do know I mentioned to some airport managers that we were going to have this conversation, and they were interested in what that actually is.
Yeah. Well, thanks. So in the short part of it is that by using this process that the FAA has made AIP eligible, we digitize the airfield down to the thickness of a penny, so 1.5 millimeter, and then we use AI to analyze it. And it's been through a 5-year review process with the FAA. And so at the end of it, you get information that typically, and I'll just say typically, we find improves your PCI score because it gives you accurate, no guesswork, right? And it tells you exactly what's wrong, where it's wrong to the severity, all per ASTM standards. We do it quickly so that you can actually make the repair, right? You don't have to wait a year from now to get the report. We're also finding that a lot of our customers now want us to not only digitize it and see what it looked like and where the distress damage was, but afterwards when it gets repaired to make sure the repair was done per the spec, right? Because they find sometimes they ask for, we want it done option A and then option B comes in and it's more expensive, right? And that's not what they asked for. So where I think this is all going,
Mhm.
and the reason, is the FAA's got some vision that by having continuous surveillance through drones and other means, but mainly through drones. And it's not the drone, it's the imagery. We use photogrammetry. We don't use lasers or anything like that. And you get these beautiful pictures. You can see exactly what it is. And it we help people like with EMAS. We can tell you if the EMAS, what kind of conditions it's in, what needs to be repaired, the runway, all that information. You want to see if the rubber buildup is, how it's going. And then we can give you predictive analysis. So we take in all the feed from the swim data to determine, hey, this is the loads hitting your runway. You can expect this runway is going to last X because of the weather and all the other factors. So what ends up happening is we give you, the airport manager and leadership, here's the information. It's massive amounts of information, but it's made really easy, just like Chat GPT. You ask it a question, here's the answer. You don't have to go through reams of FAA documents. And really, we typically work for the engineering firms. And so we do kind of all the work and give it to them. And then they do their engineering look at it and go, you know what? We could use this thing, which would even save us more money. So it's the way of the future. No one's going to go back to the measuring wheel. The people that are doing it now, it's going to end because the cost savings, the safety, the performance, all of it. And I'm happy for any of your viewers, if they would like me to take a look at their PCI or anything, most of them don't realize that the inspection is only for like 10% of the surface. And then they take that and guess on the other 90. And it's that guesswork where the inflated budgets start to come in because there may be damage here where they looked, but it doesn't always exist in the other places. And that's where huge, huge cost savings comes in.
And I will say, I try to remember every acronym, but for the people that aren't AV, pavement condition indexing, that's
Yeah.
PCI, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's an ASTM 5340 is the standard.
and that's, is that the rated, is it from 100 to 1? Is that the
Yeah,
PCI?
0 to
Or
100. 100 is brand new, 0 is like gravel.
I remember in Daytona, Howard Hughes had a conveyor that
So
was abandoned. And there also was, I think it was Trans Florida Airways, if I remember correctly. It was a 727. And it would spin sometimes on its back if it got breezy enough, like in a hurricane. But one day They were like, "Oh," we're talking about the airport was talking about Daytona 500, and we're like, "Well, we could probably put some planes over on the pavement by, the 727 and Howard Hughes' old plane." Everybody's like, "What are you talking about?" We're like, "The pavement over there." Like, "There's no pavement, it's a grass field." They're like, "No, there's pavement in there." And yeah, I think it was a 0 or -2 or there was resemblance of what used to be pavement many moons ago, back with when Embry and Riddle were kicking around out there. Um, so when it's interesting, a couple things you said about it in there. You mentioned like the engineers. So, like that side to it. So again, I'm going to try to explain it with other people that maybe listen that are in our industry. But one thing that was interesting to me is when you talked about the engineers typically handle it. So like in our case, we switch and evolve around a few things like EMAS. EMAS, like in our case, so Runway Safe, there's only one company that installs EMAS now in the United States. They came out and did an inspection on it about 5 years ago, physical inspection. And then and I've been asking the FAA to make EMAS repairs AIP eligible. There is one EMAS in Roanoke, Virginia that they ADO replaced, the airport district office replaced. But so there's a minor precedent. But so you have that. Our pavement repairs are not a capital project. We put those together each year, unless it's a rebuild on a taxiway. So when you talk about engineers typically handling it, like an airport like mine, or where you have local projects where there's not a federal grant, do you see that the airport operators that, I guess, let's just say the average person like Jeff Miller running an airport, we have an engineering firm right now, Crawford Murphy and Tilly. They haven't offered it to me when we're paying it locally. It also actually hasn't been offered to on a federal project. But if you're an airport manager and you want your technology, how is it just then do you recommend going and talking to the engineers on a case by case basis? Or is your thought, well, for price point wise, like in our case, let's say each year, I'll just throw the numbers out. Each year we do about $300,000 to $350,000 crack sealing, minor pavement repairs, spalling, that type of stuff. Is that something where you would say to an airport operator, yeah, get a drone and figure out what your PCI is? Because I didn't know until you just mentioned it. I think, is it the 90-10 rule? 90% assessed off 10 or 10% for the rest of the 90. For an airport like mine or someone else's that their engineers aren't doing it, how do you bridge that gap? How do you get your technology in your engineering firm's hands? Do you guys also say, well, the packaging is attractive enough that if you're just paying for it all locally, if you're, let's say in my case, you're running a $350,000 budget on pavement repairs, this would complement that well? Or what kind of advice would you give to an airport manager or operations person out there?
So right off the bat, I would say that whatever you spent traditionally, because we use less people out on the surface, we're about half the cost typically.
Okay.
And the savings is, like I said, you see, I would say 100 to 300x. And it's all for the fact that when you get our data, if you say, "Hey, how many cracks do I have and how much crack sealant do I need?" We can tell you, or your engineering firm will tell you from our data. So we just did like we did DFW, right? And we were able to do that was like 45 million square feet on the
I was
west.
going to say, it's a lot of pavement.
Yeah. So so people will be like, "Oh, it's too hard to get you guys in there, et cetera." We never close the runway down. We come in, we interoperate very much like the A-10, right? It's like close air support. We get in, get out, get the data. And then, in fact, we're doing Chattanooga today. And once we have the data, anywhere from 30 to 60 days, depending on how good or bad your pavement is, you'll get the answers back and it'll come. We deliver it right to ArcGIS and to Paver. And so you'll have all the answers there. You'll have the imagery there. And then, you know, if you want to know, the thing that because Paver was designed basically to take 10% data, right, and guess on the other 90. Now we put 100% data in it. It gives you pretty good information on, hey, here's what your budget and fixes can be. And then what we try to recommend is, we're so affordable. Just have us come twice a year. If you look at, and this is where I'm going to show my nerdiness, but if you look at, the AC, which is 53 for pavement management, right? That was intended to be done annually. Now you can extend the frequency by doing a PCI per ASTM standards. But the idea is that you would do the pavement inspection, and then 6 months later, you would do your 5190.6 airport inspection to see how those repairs had gone.
Yeah.
But then people had gotten into this thing of, well, I'm going to do the PCI and extend it for 3 years, and it's gotten out of that
Yeah.
cycle. But to use our capabilities, you can actually go into the ADIP portal
Yeah.
and you can select us and it takes 5 minutes. I can send you the cheat sheet on how to do it, but you put it in there and or you can have us talk to the engineering firm either way. But if you called me today and said, hey, I want it done, I could have everything ready and rolled out there literally in a few days. And we're out, we're done. And then we come back and show you all the data. And the great thing is that we do one pass and there's all kinds of other inspections that you can accomplish. Like I talked about, paint markings or rubber deposits, or you want to do your airspace obstructions, all of those things can now be taken care of by using, it's actually called remote sensing, right? Is how we do it.
Do you have and just on my experience, I have never seen someone do a pavement inspection with a drone.
Huh.
Maybe now I'll admit maybe I'm missing it and I don't know, but we're pretty heavily involved usually when there's drones around the airport because it's also one of those areas that is unique when you start dealing with the air traffic control organization. A friend of mine works at Atlanta. They have a really good relationship with the tower. Operations has drones. They can keep the airspace open, but there are some air traffic managers that require the airport to be closed. And it seems like that's getting less and less. But do you, I guess, with that process, is that part of it, or am I just missing it? Or is it still fairly new technology that is just starting to emerge as a replacement for traditional pavement repair inspections? I'm just trying to figure out because even when I talk to other airport managers, they're always very intrigued, but usually they're intrigued because they don't have any experience with this. And I'm just wondering, it was something that kept getting brought up to me when I was out in LA of like, why haven't we seen it around? Is it just because it's still so new or are we just missing it? Do you guys, because I'm assuming when there's an inspection run, you have to follow 107 guidelines, right?
Yeah. So the FAA made it eligible in March of 2025.
Oh, okay.
So
So that's fairly
it's
new.
fairly new,
Yeah.
right? So the people who adopted though, DFW, the United States Air Force, we've done about 400 airfields. And the benefit is that we come in, we get you the data. Now you've got that data, right? You've got a data point. And like with the Air Force, they came back and they said, hey, you did this thing. Can you tell us about that? They wanted to know at one airfield, can you tell us any slabs that have greater than a 3 millimeter difference on their edges with the other slab? Now you think about if you tried to do that with traditional, it's not going to, it's impossible,
Yeah, it
you know,
absolutely is.
but that just, it's like, okay, stand by, we'll run the data for you. And that's where it's going to go. And give you another example. We helped the Royal Australian Air Force, and this is how easy it is.
I know why you help them. I know.
We trained them virtually. We sent them the equipment, and I'm sure we broke a bunch of rules doing that. But anyway, I apologize profusely to any rule monitors out there. We sent the equipment, they inspected their airfield, sent it back, we processed the data. And so that's where this is going to go is that this summer we're actually evolving our drone in the box capabilities so that a drone can live on the airfield. And the FAA, if you look, deep down into their bowels, they want to first they wanted to do pay analysis, then they wanted to do perimeter security. They want to support aircraft rescue firefighting, so we don't have the same thing that happened out at SFO. So the
Yeah,
drone gets out there ahead of time. Wildlife. I mean, you think all the data we get, and again, the drone is just a tool. I mean, it's like having a cell phone. It's
yeah,
just a tool. And the technology that comes from digitizing the airfield, and you put it in the hands of smart people like the airport manager, the engineering folks, the FBO, anybody who's doing ground ops security, you just take the same data and you dice and slice it and give them the important parts. And the efficiencies that come out of it are amazing. And so that's what we try to do. And we also do the financial analysis. We had an airport that came to us and they go, we want to increase our fuel sales. We said, let us look at the data. And we said, here, we know these are the only levers you have. Do these levers, and we think it'll double. Well, it actually quadrupled. And
wow.
so it's that kind of stuff that very data driven. Get rid of the, hey, that looks about right. Oh, we've always been
Yeah.
doing it this way. And I think that, like with the help of Dr. Byer, I'll say that because she's listening there, is you get that information back to the people coming up through Embry-Riddle,
Yeah.
right? So that as they hit the ground, they understand the data side of it and how it can really help them. And the other thing is the airport sponsors, the economics. I don't think they fully grasp the economic engine that an airfield is.
Yeah.
You think about all the stuff that's happening, and it's just amazing. And if you start to track it, then it starts to become evident, right? And so that's what we try to do. We will track and show people, hey, this is where the airplanes are coming from. Everybody knows where the airlines are coming from, but it's the
Yeah.
private and who's coming in. And, hey, instead of trying to sell 40 gallons of gas, why don't we try to sell 400 gallons of gas?
Yeah.
So, I don't know if you charge landing fees or not,
We
but
don't.
the data, this is the thing that I will say, is that the data will show you ways in which you can generate revenue without charging landing fees.
Yeah.
And, pilots don't want to pay landing
They
fees.
don't. They
So,
don't.
but they're happy to buy $100 hamburger,
They are.
Oh,
Do that.
that's the way you gotta kinda play it, and that's what we try to help. We're trying to get everything organized, make it very digital, get it into your cell phone, and make it so that it's easy to get all the information instead of having to dig through all the FAA regs and find different things, and it's all digitized. So, the PCI stuff was our first kind of entry into the market.
Yeah.
But now we're really ramping up on the, hey, let's put information into the hands of management and sponsorship and FBOs and really let them have a tool that will help them make things safer, better performing, and generate revenue.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, the generate revenue is definitely an interesting component. In your example of like the 3-inch lips and stuff like that, I mean, the reality of operators are you can't. There's just no way to physically look at all that stuff. So you put it on intervals, right? You go out, and if you've ever spent time in the infield looking at pavement lips on signage, and it's very tasking. So, I do love that it gives that more, your ability to have a better assessment on the airfield. When you mention things like rubber buildup, one
Mhm.
tool that we use often, something like a Beaumont, right, or a CFME to get the coefficient of friction on rubber buildup, because the contaminant, so for listeners that are not in aviation, contaminant like rubber buildup, plane lands, leaves rubber behind. It can get just as slick as if there's ice out there or something, if it gets bad enough. Up here in the northern area, typically in the wintertime, we do pull a lot of that off, but then out in California, we would have to have people come in and actually physically remove it. But with like your drone, does it show a contaminant on the runway, or do you have something that is comparable to what you can produce with a Beaumont for the coefficient of friction? Or is it, if you get like a report back, say airport manager gets it and says, hey, there's a lot of rubber buildup, you should go assess
Mhm.
it? Or is it giving you even beyond that? I'm just curious in my own mind. I like it
Well,
either way, but just
you're
curious.
you're way ahead of the game. So this time next week, I'm actually going to be speaking at the ICAO, the
Oh,
International
okay.
Civil Aviation Organization, about this. So not going as a vendor, but the capabilities, are that we can see the macro and micro surface. And so we can see not only is there rubber in there, what's happening to the top portion of the groove? Is it is the surface failing? How much
Yeah.
real surface area do you have? And then we know that we can work by giving that information. I think that's the missing part of runway excursions and things like that, is that if you have the surface completely detailed out, you know what it's going to do. We can tell you, hey, at an inch of rain, this is where you're going to get hydroplaning. This is where, you don't have proper, the grooves haven't been cut deep enough, different things like that. And you start to tie that into the aircraft systems now. And you don't even really need to, you can observe the aircraft, with cameras from the ground, but the information like Airbus has on the braking, if you tie those two things together, they internally can share within their fleet or organization or airline what the braking is really doing, because those machines that go down and measure the the braking friction, what they're, they've got a tire about this wide and you look at what's really landing and then you look at the width of the different tires. I mean, it's almost, I want to say it's done as a facade to say we're doing something. And it's not really giving proper attention to data that can be taken now and improve safety. So
No,
that's what we're working on.
I love to hear that because, after the Midway accident with Southwest and we ended up with the runway condition assessment matrix, which replaced mu values, I appreciate the spirit of where the FAA was going with that to make it less subjective. However, I feel like what the end result was way more subjective reviews, especially when you get into field condition reporting. And what ended up happening was you can't report the mu values anymore on a notice to airmen. And so you end up in a position, at least at the beginning, I don't really hear it as much anymore, where pilots would ask, hey, what's the mu values? Because that's what everybody knew, right? Everybody knew, we're looking for 40. Okay. Hopefully more, but at least 40. But that's what we're looking for. And so, and then we end up in this position where we're assessing off of visual cues. Okay. And there's the whole matrix behind it. But to me, then it's subjective to Jeff Miller versus Grant. And okay, what's your opinion versus my opinion? And then the only way you can upgrade a field condition report is with a mu value. And you're telling us the mu values aren't important. At the time, they had mentioned that they were testing some sort of coefficient of friction that would come off of the landing gear of an aircraft, which I loved it. I was like, yes, yes, let's go that way. Because what would end up happening too is you get a PIREP, right? You get a pilot report and you might have someone fly New York, Buffalo, then down to Pittsburgh and they're like, yeah, it's good. Braking action's good. It's great. Fine. Then you get someone who's been flying, Miami to Orlando and happens to come into Pittsburgh and they're like, nil, it's horrible. Like, okay. And in my mind, because you're right, like us as operators, you look like the BOMOC it's a tool, but are a lot of flaws around it. There's a lot of flaws around the CFME because you're exactly right. It doesn't have the characteristics of a landing aircraft. So they had talked about it back then. And I literally was just talking about this about a year ago. And I was like, I don't know whatever happened to it. I mean, it seemed like they were on such a good thought there to put it inside the aircraft. That would be the best reporting. So I love to hear you guys are on that again, because I do think ultimately that would be the best assessment rather than anybody's opinion. And that includes the pilot in my mind because of the example I
Yeah.
just gave.
Pilots are not a good sensor. The thing I would say is that the challenge is aircraft manufacturers are not going to give up the data, right?
Yeah.
So we have to go kind of in knowing that that's not going to happen. But
Right.
with other sensors, you can look and determine that, hey, this type of aircraft landed here, and you can pretty much determine the ground track and everything and say, hey, this is what we expected. This is what the calculation is. You can we can take what we have measured and put it into simulators, and you can do all kinds of different things with it. So the bottom line to me is that at the end of the day, the pilot's coming down to land. Is the runway good, or am I going to have to do
Right.
something now so that I don't go off the end of the runway?
Right.
That's all I want to know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, again, that just the leaps and bounds that we've gone over the last, I'd say, decade.
Yeah. Hey,
As I mentioned,
do not
I've been here.
don't.
Oh, good.
I was going to say, don't advertise on your show that we're talking about Mew. No one will tune in.
You know what's funny though? So I was saying this to Nicole, and it's the interesting thing about podcasting. And I say this when guests ask me, because some guests, you don't want to listen to me. I'm like, but that's it's like when you look at podcasting, right? And I love this space because after this is year 25 for me in aviation, and I do get frustrated with the alphabet soups sometimes because you just want to have a real conversation, an honest conversation, and because we all have issues and problems, and I'll admit that all day long on the airport side, because nothing's perfect. But, the thing with podcasting is people love the details. And when you think about what this format is, right, most of it's listening. So we have the video, like I'd say 0.5%, 1% around that typically will watch it. And that's a dedication. You're actually tuning in to watch something actively. 99% of it is they're doing something else, right? Somebody's out exercising, walking. Somebody reaches out to me all the time that exercises. So hi to them. Hi, Julie. So, okay. Got that. But, those people that are out doing that, they hear something. They hear Grant say something. Oh, I want to look into that. That's interesting. And so, I always say, because people are like, well, what's too long? And I'm like, I don't, there is, it's the, if you want to have a long conversation and you want to get into detail, podcasting is where it is because people are already saying, okay, I'm going to dedicate my time to listen to Grant. I want to hear what he has to say. And so usually what I find is if people skip over things too much in this format, that's usually when the people are kind of like, I wish I could have known more or whatever. So I think you're in the right space. One, for nerds like me, but two, if you're just tuning in, you're like, oh, and it helps too. You've been cracking some jokes and you got
Great
some good acronyms.
jokes. Yeah, those are truths.
So you mentioned that this is AIP eligible.
Yeah.
So when we talk like airports and we talk about capital outlay, a capital improvement program or 5 to 6 years, look out depending on how you look at the math on that. I will say 5 years. In Illinois, that's a TIPS. That's a transportation improvement program because we got to be different. But a SIP is a tip, different states. So with that, airport operators and people that are listening that plan out their budget, is your recommendation to work with like in our case, the Illinois Department of Aeronautics or the airport district's office? We have both that we deal with, but some states just have one or the other to work to put an actual line item in for pavement inspection, or is your recommendation to add it on to a project like we have a hotspot reconfiguration project, which is one taxiway that's being reconfigured from old geometry that the FAA no longer likes. But let's just say logistically, would you recommend as Silent Falcon that I could put a full airfield assessment into that one taxiway realignment project and the FAA would be fine funding it for the entirety of the airport? Or is your recommendation to have a standalone, or did I miss the cue and it is more of a local thing to work locally with local funds?
I
What can
think
you
it
give advice on that?
Yeah, I would say it's I think it's kinda all of the above, and it
Okay.
depends. I mean, it's like, we will talk to the ADO if we
Okay.
need to, right? They've the first ones, like Jack McAfee, VP down at, Chattanooga. His team was great. They said, "Here's what we wanna do," and we clearly saved them quite a bit of money and not having to close a runway they were told had to be redone. And so he was sort of the guinea pig going through. So we learned a lot going through doing it on the ADIP portal and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day it's kind of sailing through and, once you kind of got the formula, it's very straightforward. And what I would say is we're happy to talk to anybody. We did this through the FAA Tech Center. So if you want to hear how that went, I mean, it took 5 years.
Is that
Um,
Atlantic City? Is that
Atlantic City, yeah, Jim
okay?
Patterson up there, great
Okay.
guy.
Yep.
And then with all the airports we've done, now we've done a DFW. And the interesting thing is that once the airport engineer, management, they see the data that is suddenly at their fingertips, they're like, okay, I want to be able to access this. And so what we're trying to do right now is make it so that they can access it as easy as on their phone. And then make it so affordable, that it doesn't always have to go through this ADIP process, because the data can be reused for, hey, this is a project that need to be done in the future, or whatever the case may be. So I would say we're happy to work with anybody, any engineering firm, any airport. You want to talk to a reference, you want to talk to the Air Force, see what they're doing. I would say the Air Force is actually really leaning forward and digitizing everything. And I understand why, because of all the other systems out there, right? And I think the same thing will happen with the airports, is they'll suddenly see it's the power of the AI allows that leveraging, that force multiplier, so that your one person who's out on airfield ops is like 10 because they've
Yeah.
got information in their hands. And we're happy to, if an airport has like its own drone team, we're happy to train them. We're happy, we just want to make it safer for the flying public. We want to make it more affordable for the people managing airports. And hopefully the performance increases and ultimately it turns into, well, gosh, look at how much money we're saving. Hey, we can use that money to do these other things and generate revenue. And it's just this snowball that starts to pick up because it's not going away. I mean, it is
Yeah.
just not going away. And it's just going to keep getting better and better and better.
Well, you know what I would say too is as adapting and geeking out in Waymo, it shouldn't, I mean, you should improve, right? Improve upon things. And I love that. So as the end package result, talk about ADIP a lot, and I'm gonna butcher this one. I know the last one's portal, airport database portal. It's the FAA's portal for airports to put everything into it. And I think eventually the 5010s produced at ADIP for, visual learners. With when you run an inspection on, like, let's say an entirety of an airfield and its surfaces, you produce a platform that is like GIS based.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So,
So
and then,
you
okay.
can have, again, we take the same data and
Yeah.
deliver it to how the person wants it.
Okay.
So if you're an airfield manager or your airfield ops or something like that, you don't need the heavy duty
Right.
GIS stuff. You want to know something local that you can look at your phone, right? And not
Right.
know all the other stuff. But that same data that drove that is also driving for the engineer who's in an office somewhere trying to figure
Yeah.
out what the best plan is for 5 years down the road.
Well, no, I love that because, obviously my job and more the engineers too, of course, but getting into it and figuring out, from what is produced to having a good capital outlay plan, especially if it's something that's more locally funded, like for the capital outlay, like if it, like I said, our crack ceiling and stuff like that. But
Uh-huh.
where I think what would be extremely beneficial for like your board, right? Like we have a board of directors for those people that are in those decision making roles that don't. The reality is, if you're in a role like that, you're not going to get into every number. But if you had something that was, I'm in my mind, tell me I'm completely stupid here and I'll take that and leave because that's fine. That's usually where I'm at life. But that showed like our airfield with maybe color coding or something that you could be like, here's, because then that I think for the decision makers, you're like, like this is like we just decommissioned a runway 624, and it was a crosswind runway. We have 3 runways. We now have 2. I'm a pilot myself. I'm not a fan of necessarily closing the runways, and I hope this is the only time in my career that I have to do it. But it makes a lot of financial sense. The FAA stopped funding it. The pavement, it was barely a runway. It had more bends in it than Owen Wilson's nose. It's a runway-ish, but and it was funny because I met the guy. The airport was private until 1986, and I met the guy who built it, and I was like, "What was your engineering firm?" He's like, "Engineering firm. I had a guy on a bulldozer." I was like, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense." But in your guys' case, like that pavement was horrible, and we knew we were going to close it, so we were just trying to get to the point where it was going to close, and then we have a development happening with part of it. And so, but in that case, in my mind, I would envision like a big red blotch over it and then be like,
Mhm.
okay, but here's our plan. We're getting rid of 624 and we're going to, this is coming out. This area is a hot spot that's getting reconfigured. Is that, am I on the right track as far as I know you said you can produce it to however you want, but you guys through your process could produce something that's very easily digestible for maybe like a board member or someone who wants to just pull out an overlay and say, we need to really start looking at this area in the next 5 years type of thing.
Yeah, you're spot on. In fact, we work a lot with, we have our airport managers out there that we love to hear from. Chance Watson's down at the port of South Louisiana Airport, and really sharp guy and really thinking ahead for that airfield. It's going to be amazing. But he will call us and say, "Hey, here's the problem," and we go, "Okay," and we understand how to solve it. So what we're doing right now, and maybe we can come back on the show in a little while. Maybe we'll send Nicole on or something. But we're going to put something in the hands of people that want to know about your airfield.
Okay.
Not just manager, but it's gonna
Yeah.
have everything's gonna be there so that the manager can look at it, members can look at it, the local community can look at it, because you've always gotta maintain outreach with the community and things, and you can select, to what level of information they need to know. And it's like how you described it, right? It's kinda layered where the engineers, they wanna get down, they wanna look at the cracks and crevices, and the local the person living off the end of the runway wants to know, "Hey, why aren't the airplanes flying over my roof anymore? Because, oh, they closed the runway," right? I mean,
Yeah.
It's the same data, just repackaged and delivered in an easy to consume methodology.
I love that.
And yeah, it's you're spot on. I mean, you should come join us. But that's what we need is we need to it's so I mean, when you think about it, aviation is so kinda disorganized,
It is. It
and we
is. It
need to get
absolutely is.
that together. The
You
military
know
aviation is not, right? Because it was
yes.
very,
Yeah.
"You gotta do
Yeah.
it this way no matter where you go."
Right.
It's the opposite in civil aviation.
It's funny because I do find in my role, and people take it differently, but as the airport, as like a local government, we get a little more latitude, I think, typically, and we have a lot of federal silos within it. And then we have private industry, which is very, you're dealing with shareholders and okay. But I find in my role that, and I love when I see other airport managers in this thought process because, a lot of times there isn't someone there to try to connect everybody, right? And everybody's just doing their thing. And, I don't have any, it's like when someone calls and, maybe complains about someone, and I'll say, listen, you tell me, give me a timeline, show me, and we have systems like Vertower and stuff, right? And WingX, and we use the advanced version of FlightAware. Nothing is ever one with ADSB equalized. You can see a swing of like 40,000 operations, but you'll be like, listen, I don't control the airspace and I don't control that flight school, but if they're bothering you, I don't mind at least as a human being calling and saying, hey, listen, this area, just so you know. And I've done that, or it's the same with the tower and calling up and saying, hey, here's an issue. Like prime example, we have our 100 year, right? And we want to do airplane rides during that. And it's not my call whether they allow it or don't allow it. That's theirs. But what is my call is how good of a relationship I have with them, and you could bang your head against the wall all day long, or you could just reach out and have, I know, God forbid, maybe a phone call or something, reach out and just have a conversation. Say, hey, here's the problem. Here's what we're trying to do. Because I do feel those silos all across the board. And it's the same. AOPA was on the podcast, and I have a really good relationship with Kyle Lewis, who's our regional director with AOPA. I'm an AOPA member, and I've said, I get that we're not always going to agree, and that's okay. And that's why we're here in America. We could disagree, and listen, I'm not set in my ways completely. I can receive new information and change my opinion. And that happens, and I think, when you look at like technology like this or try and connect, I love that getting that out to people. I love that exposure. Because it creates an environment where if people understand what you're doing, they get a little less frustrated maybe about the negative consequences that they see of your result of your activity. So I'm all for it. So if you're an airport manager, one, I'll put your show notes, or in the show notes, I'll put down Silent Falcon's information so they can contact you. But I'll say everybody I've talked to in the industry knows of you, which is good. So that's good. But they are some of the stuff I talked about earlier where they get a little confused on it. I get a little confused. I have much better information now, so I really appreciate that, Grant. But if you are an airport manager and let's say I call up Dr. Byer and I say, I'm in need, I have a sickness. You have the only cure, and it's your drone, doctor. Can you send it my way? What would I expect? Would I expect to receive a drone in the mail? Do I expect a person in a drone? If let's say we kick off a full inspection at Chicago Executive Airport, what happens?
Yeah, so, you would say, "Hey, these are the days I wanna do it," and we would take a look and say, "Hey, what times do you wanna make sure," right? But essentially, we'll coordinate everything. You don't have to call anybody.
So
We'll
no
then
107 stuff. You guys take
we'll
care. Okay,
we'll take
love it.
care of all that, and then, what will happen is you'll get a call from the FAA, and they say, "Hey, Silent Falcon says they're gonna come out and to you. Is that true?" And somebody will say, "Yes," and then we arrange a day, and typically we'll come out the day prior, meet with anybody who wants to meet with us, all the stakeholders. Sometimes the flight schools will arrange so that they don't, hang out in the pattern and beat it up. So we just go through all that and we create essentially a map of the airfield that shows these are the areas we're going to inspect and at what time. The runways, let's say you tell us, hey, you've only got an hour max on the runway. We'll calculate it. It's just math, and we'll go, okay, we're going to bring up 3 drones, and we'll get them all done. so that we're in and out. And then we coordinate with ATC, or if it's a Unicom, and we just flow through, we capture all the data, um, and then we leave, and we will meet with either your engineering firm or you or whatever you want. And in 30 to 60 days, depending on the size and condition of your airfield, you'll have all your answers at your fingertips. And it will be, here's where you're at. Here's the suggested based on the FAA guidelines as to what needs to be done. And then the engineers will put in their 2 cents to say, hey, we've got this other plan and here's how we're going to integrate it, right? And so that's how we work. And we've even gone to, like you mentioned, your engineering firm. We have trained engineering firm pilots to go out and do it so that they have, and we just process the data. We're really an AI company, and the drone portion is the collection of the data, but we focus on the analysis, the visualization, and then the monetization for you at the end.
I love that.
So we try to keep it, we've been in 6 countries. We've done, like I said, 400 airfields. We're working for the Air Force. Everybody's got, it's what do they always say? You've seen one airport, you've seen them all, kind of, or
Yeah.
not in one airport, you've seen one airport. So each one will have its, we'll study it, we'll
Yeah.
understand it. And then what we'll do is afterwards, we'll say, look, here's what we think is going to happen with your pavement, or here's what we think is, these trees, we can say, hey, these trees are going to grow up here. They've got a growth rate of X, so that you can start thinking about it. And it's not a big surprise. We just go from being reactive to proactive, and it saves a lot of money.
Well, and I'm going to say, I think one thing too that resonates is the economic side too. I mean, obviously the safety and it's for, I see all the benefits of it because if you've operated an airport before, those areas where it's just logistically impossible to inspect everything that they want you to inspect, especially at a 139 airport each time, when you
Mhm.
start looking at it. So that's when you start to peel it out and say, okay, what's calculated risk, the things at the lips and stuff like that. But so I love getting a real detailed snapshot of that, but the economic side to it is a driver as well, and
Sure.
I could talk to you all day long because I'd love to peel into what that is, but I've kept you longer than I promised to, so I won't. But um so as far as like an airport that is, contemplating getting into maybe this space with UAS, I think a critical thing that you just said is um you don't have to sacrifice the airport, right? You can do roving closures. Obviously, you didn't close DFW. So to the point you just made, and like in our case, now that we have 2 runways, they're intersecting. So runway 1230, 1634. In my mind, for doing an inspection on, you come out and do the whole airfield, you would close 1230 and then work locally with us when you need to cross 1634 or keep back out of the safety area. But like, again, logistically, people that are listening, especially if you're in that airport manager side of the world, you could do this, you could perform all this. I would assume it has to be during daylight hours. Assume, maybe I'm off on that. Maybe it's got night vision
Yeah.
during
Yeah.
daylight
We
hours, but you could still generally function as a facility.
Yeah, to put it in perspective, every drone that we send out can capture data at 1,000,000 square feet an hour.
Wow.
So,
Really? Wow.
you think about, what you got, a
Yeah.
5,000-foot runway,
Yeah.
and just calculate it. So it's
Don't forget about
pretty
the one
quick.
foot, 5,001.
Sorry, 5,001. So it's pretty quick. And the thing is that we're essentially, when you do runway or remote sensing, you are an aircraft, right? So if somebody is coming into land, it takes us 30 seconds to come out of the runway safety area, put it on the ground. The airplane comes in and we go back out. We don't have to have a continuous closure.
Okay.
So yeah, 1,000,000 square feet. I don't know. You calculate it out. That's how many hours it takes. And, if you want it to take over a week and you want us there 1 hour in the morning, we're
Yeah.
very, very flexible. And
Okay.
that's the key to air power.
No, I think that, yeah, absolutely. That's gonna resonate a lot. Grant, I kept you longer than I promised, so I apologize for that. But
No worries. I enjoyed it. It was great fun.
is there anything I didn't ask you about Silent Falcon, or don't you want me to put you on the spot anymore with NATO? Any, anything
I
else?
probably won't be traveling to Europe in your future.
Well, you always have that dual citizenship with Australia.
No, I think we've angered everybody.
That's, if you're on the internet and you anger everybody, you did your job.
There you go. And please call Jeffrey Miller with any of your complaints.
Yeah, yeah. Well, trust me, they will. Don't you worry about that. This has been such a pleasure for me. Again, thank you not only for your service, but I love my pilot friends and I love seeing it. But I also love. I was just talking with somebody the other day about this that they have such an immense knowledge in the industry and they're applying it in such ways that are unique. And I feel like that's the same with you. And I love that. You take your perspectives that you've learned over the time in our industry to make it not only safer, economically viable, which I think sometimes that gets lost a little bit in the weeds, but then you end up in a position like we have now where a lot of airports don't make money and people like me that love our industry, love to fly, love to see people get involved with it. I do get concerned when you start seeing, the Santa Monicas of the world. Seems like
Mhm.
Boulder, Colorado has gotten off their kick to maybe close the airport. But it is, it's a hard case when you start talking about an airport that doesn't make money. So if your product not only can be first and foremost improve the safety, but also improve, the economics at some of these facilities, I'm all in. I love it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And tell your audience, it's more than one, right?
Uh, well, my mom listens, so that's two.
But I mean, the people in the audience are the people I would say are the unsung heroes, right? They're the
Yeah,
ones that, every passenger, hey, where am I sitting on the airplane? And then they leave, where are my bags? And they beat feet and they don't think about any of the rest of us, right?
yeah.
So I really appreciate, want to thank all the people out there that are doing that work that goes unnoticed by your typical passenger, but you're keeping the flying public safe. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I think they'll love that. I actually just yesterday, someone who listens locally, I'd never met him before, but they listen to all the episodes. I'm like, oh, so I met him at a park, her and her friend, and they're older, but she has a backstory. She, hurt her back. She went to walk for a couple of years. So she's traveling all over the world now, which is a great story, right? She's like, if you lose your mobility, what's the next, when you don't have it, then you come back. It's like kind of talk about the USA. If you didn't have all the freedoms that we have, you sure as heck would miss them. And she wasn't able to walk for a couple of years, and so she's traveling over the place. She just got back from Virginia. She has a plan to go to Ireland, and she listens to the show because she likes aviation and stuff like that. But she was talking about all the
Cool.
past episodes and the guests, and I was telling her a little bit about this episode. It's, oh, it's so interesting. And so I appreciate you mentioning that to them because that woman was my mother. But no, they do, and I talked to Dr. Byer and Nicole a little bit about this, and the thing with the listeners that they love is so many times in our industry, and what she was telling me yesterday is, there's this kind of barrier, and maybe unattended or whatever, but it's so regulated. You go into an airport and you see 5 or 6 signs, right? Badge display, do not enter here to close the door. Don't look over this way. And they love people like you. They're like, wow, he flew an F-16 and now he's working in this space where he's making what I do, where I travel, where I'm at safer. This guy's in, I love that. And it gives them a peek behind the curtain to see some of it that, I get it, but it goes back to some of their statements of where we are as an industry. And I do feel like just by design, you really don't get to see any of that, right? And people are so curious about it. Even mu values. I'm sure she'll ask me at some point, what's that?
That should be the
Uh,
feature.
yeah. But thank you, Grant, for offering your time on a Friday, looking very dapper. So Dr. Byer did her job there.
Thanks, Dr. Byer.
Thanks, Dr. Byer. I feel like such a slob in this polo. I can't do anything about the no hair, but what am I going to do there? But Grant, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I will
Thanks,
put
Jeff.
your company in the show notes so people know how to reach out to you. And
Awesome.
again, thank you for being on Destination Aviation.
Appreciate it. Great show. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you too.
Later.
Wow, that was a great conversation as usual. Thank you to Grant, not only for his service, but honoring by coming on to the show. Just got back from AAAE. I did have a good time. I got to meet up with people in the industry that I love to chat with. Got to have some great lunches. LA, I've always said, California, I enjoyed my time there. I don't think I'd want to live there again. It's too expensive. I'm too poor to live there. But it was a nice time. I got on the train and was able to get down to a Angels game. I bought an Angels cap, but they were playing the White Sox, which I'll admit I do root for the Sox, but also the Cubs because I'm in Chicago. So I don't have one in particular. So you can hate me for liking both, but I did feel like maybe I sent out a bad omen there by buying that Angels cap. But it reminded me of what Christopher Lloyd had when he was in Angels in the outfield. So if that my intentions were pure. But I had such a nice time chatting with people, getting home, love being home. Loved our conversation there. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, dapodcast85@gmail.com. That's where you can find us. Say anything you want. That's your spot. That's your sounding board. That's where you get to hear from Jeff Miller. But thank you so much for always tuning in and listening. Or if you're watching on the YouTube channel, thank you for going over there and watching. I know I've been getting a lot of emails on the Waco, and Waco closed. I know, but I think I was the last person to take a tour. I'm still figuring that out. I love the fact that the factory was right near here, but we'll figure out the logistics. I feel sad for the 60 employees that are affected by that. They had such a great operation over there, and I will get that video out because I do think I was the last tour in there. But yeah, ultra sad. I hope I wasn't a bad omen for them. Maybe I was for them and the Angels. Oof, maybe I should just steer clear of things. But thank you to all you for continuing to tune in. The audience continues to always grow, and I love that. I appreciate that. Thank you to everybody out in LA that said good things about the show. I loved it. And until next time, my friends, I'll see you down the runway.